3, Escaping the Tragedy, Ostrom's Analysis. So in the last part we found that the prisoner's dilemma in common property resources is not inevitable if there's a long-term relationship between the players. So if there's the opportunity for reward and punishment over a long period of time, then a cooperative solution might emerge. And we showed that this could be reinforced by tit-for-tat strategies. Elinor Ostrom, who's actually a political scientist, took this form of analysis a great deal further. Her point was that economists in most cases don't give people enough credit for cooperation and social cohesion and organisation. And she did lots of empirical work around the world and found a large number of examples where communities could manage their commons efficiently without government intervention and without the common property resources being allocated to individual firms. For this work she won the 2009 Nobel Prize for Economics, and the Nobel Committee citation stated that she developed a proper understanding of human cooperation, and that this requires a more nuanced analysis of individuals' motives than has been usual in economic science, especially regarding the nature and origin of reciprocity. So reciprocity is where if you help me, then I'll help you, and that turns out to be quite important in common property resources in many parts of the world. Elinor Ostrom challenged the conventional wisdom that common property resources are poorly managed and should be completely privatised or regulated by central authorities. Based on numerous studies of user-managed fish stocks, pastures, woods, lakes and groundwater basins, Ostrom concluded that the outcomes are often better than predicted by standard theories. User-managed commons are often more efficient than those managed by government. And I'll illustrate this with an example from Bodrum in Turkey. So this is an example of where a common property resource is self-organised by a group of fishermen, and they have come up with an approximately optimal solution to managing this fishery. It's probably not as efficient as it could be, but it's a lot better than an open access fishery or an overexploited common property fishery. So Bodrum is located in the Aegean, inshore fishery with about 100 local fishermen operating 2 to 3 person boats. So these details are quite important. The fact it's an inshore fishery with not a massive number of fishermen, and the fact that entry into the common is limited. In the 1970s there was a lot of time and money spent racing to the best fishing sites, and this meant that the fishery was not very well run. Fishing cooperatives got together and eventually decided upon the following scheme. So in each season a list of eligible fishermen is drawn up restricting access. So that's the first most important thing. Fishing locations are named and listed. Fishermen draw lots for their first fishing location. On each day the fishermen move one location east, giving roughly equal opportunities to catch migratory fish. And this This system reduces fights over preferred location and is self-policing, in that the fishermen will tend to dob other fishermen in if they're fishing in the wrong place. The Turkish government supports the scheme but has no direct involvement, so the fishermen are managing it themselves. Case study 2 is the Carta di Regola from the Italian Alps. Italian rural charters operated from the 13th to the 19th century in northern Italy to regulate common property resources such as wood, grazing and alpine lands at the village level. They were highly complex, but the prince rulers allowed villagers to monitor and enforce agreed common property use by a system of fines. The inspection was by an inform on your neighbour. Self-organisation. So some games need an umpire, and in fact the fishermen act pretty well as their own referees or umpires to the rules of the fishing game. In each season a list of eligible fishermen is drawn up restricting access, so that's the most important step. Fishing locations are named and listed. Fishermen draw lots for their first fishing location. On each day the fishermen move one location east, giving roughly equal opportunities to catch migratory fish. This process reduces fights over preferred location and is self-policing because the fishermen inform on other fishermen if they're in the wrong place. The Turkish government supports the scheme but has no direct involvement. Second case study, Carta di Regola. Italian rural charters operated from the 13th to the 19th century in northern Italy to regulate common property resources such as woods, grazing and alpine lands at the village level. Highly complex, but the prince rulers allowed villagers to monitor and enforce agreed common property use by a system of fines. The inspection was by an inform on your neighbour system, where the neighbour received some of the fine. I can imagine that this could actually be quite problematic, but it seemed to work. Outsiders coming into the region were a problem, so the commons were only granted to citizens of the village by a committee, and they avoided the problem of open access where all comers gain access to the common. So there was just a list of people who could access the common. In Romano, the valley had a narrow section, so they built a gate to exclude outsiders. So this is addressing the open access problem, which can easily undermine even the best managed commons. So the references for these studies are given here, and this completes looking at common property resources.